Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and today it feels like a beautiful spring day out. The sun is shining, the birds are out singing, which means I need to plant some posies. Well, or at least make some posies. This free quilt pattern with these beautiful posies on it is from Benartex, and I'll put a link in the description so that you can follow along. And it uses these beautiful chalk textured fabrics. All of the colors are rich and have that beautiful tone on tone, which means at a distance they do look like a solid color. There are 20 posies in the quilt, which means we are going to be able to choose 20 10-inch squares. I do want this quilt bright and cheery, so I did choose 20 of the brightest colors that I could find. The quilt will take additional colors. The gray, the green, and the blue, I did not add to make those flowers. I do want those different. And I did choose a really sweet little background fabric with these tiny little flowers on it. Now, something that I like to do when I am cutting out a quilt is to photograph that page of my cutting directions. And then I cut those individual colors out in little strips or in portions that they come with. So I will have that little strip that goes with that fabric. And then I will take some notes or some type of a marking system and write down what needs to be cut. I will transfer these to the appropriate sizes as I'm cutting. So this is what my pieces will look like after. It's a great way of double checking your work and keeping organized. Once we have all of our additional pieces cut, we're going to be able to work on these beautiful fabrics. Now, each one of these squares is going to make one of those posies. And to make one of these posies, we're going to start and take that 10-inch square and cut it so we have 4 5-inch squares. So we are going to be making each of those squares into a snowball block. So let me get my 10-inch squares cut and ready to go, and then I'm going to share a tip on how to put those corners on. To turn these squares into those little posy blocks, we are going to need B, which is an 1.5-inch cut square, and C, which is a 2-inch square. These are going to be stitched and flipped to make that snowball block. Now we can draw a line from corner to corner on each of those blocks and stitch, or we can let the machine do all of the work. I like to mark my sewing machine surface with diagonal tape. Now this is called Cluck Cluck Sew, and what it is a removable tape with 1/4-inch marks. Now you can do the same with masking tape and draw your own lines, but this definitely makes it a lot easier. And to use it, what we're going to do is take that foot off, open up a little bit of the tape, and put the needle right through the middle of the tape, just on the end. So that needle is going right through the center. Then I'm going to take an additional ruler, and I'm going to find any line here that is going to help keep me straight. Find a line with the ruler. Once this ruler is straight, I'm going to be able to lie that tape down right beside that ruler. Now I can just rub that down. Give a second check and make sure it's straight. I can trim it just with a pin, so I'm going to take it off of the feed dogs. But I now have that nice strip that is going to keep me straight. I'm going to be able to put my foot back on, and now I'm going to use that line to my advantage. Normally we have that line that's drawn, and we're going to stitch from corner to corner. And when we do that, you'll notice that that line is following that center line. So I'm going to be able to do the same without drawing the line. I'm going to have the right sides matching. I'm going to slide that fabric so it touches the needle right to that point. So my needle is touching this point. This point is going to follow that center line. You can see that it's always going to follow that line. So I have accomplished the same thing. I've stitched without having to draw the line. And I'm going to be able to do one piece right after another. Regardless if you use this diagonal seam tape or just do a masking tape, it's going to definitely speed up your sewing. Once we have all 4 of those blocks done, we're going to be able to trim off these little points, leaving a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We are going to need to put these together, but there is a way we can press them so that they go together easy. We need to press 2 in one direction and 2 in the opposite direction. So for the 2, all of those points are going to go out, so that seam allowance is coming up. The other 2, we're going to press so the seam allowance is going in. So we're going to do in for 4 corners, out for 4 corners. So we have 2 seams going in one direction, 2 going in the other. And that's going to make it easier to put them together. The 2 larger squares are going to go together in the center. And by having seams that are opposing each other, they're going to nestle together. So they're going in opposite directions on all corners. We're going to be able to pick these up and we're going to feel and nestle those seams together and stitch down that one side. So you're going to be able to take both of those pieces and stitch them together. We now are going to be able to put these together. And when you flip them, you're going to find that those seams are going to match. The only thing you're going to need to decide is how to match this. Do you want it to go down or up? And I do that right at the machine. So I'm nestling that center one. They're all going to be nestled and I stitch down. So I stitch those 2 together without pressing that center seam. Now I'm going to press it. I'm going to be able to open up that block and we can see where those 2 seams are going to want to go. This center seam, we're going to be able to just take a couple of the stitches out of that seam allowance in that center and have them going in opposite directions. So what's going to happen is all of the seams are going to go around in a circle. When we do that, it gives us a little 4 patch right here in the center. I do not trim off those threads, I just leave them. That row of stitching will anchor those 2 little stitches that you took out. Now when I turn it over, all of those sections match. And I have a perfect 9.5 inch block. From here, we get to put them together with rows of sashing. And for that, we're going to start with D, 2.5 by 9.5, and this is that background fabric. The quilt is put together in rows of 4 and 5 rows. The pattern does have us laying out those rows and putting the sashing in between. Well, we're still going to need to do that, but we can do a little bit of that step beforehand. Every posy block will need 1 row of sashing. So that is the posy, and there's that 1 row. So it's just going on the side. Don't worry about this one right away. Let's just get that side on every single block. This is going to make it easier to lay them out so we can visually see how we want them. Then it'll be easy to stitch those rows together and add that 1 piece on each side. So I have that 1 posy, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. So just on that end, I need to add that 1 sashing strip. And that will give me 1 complete row. From there, we're going to be able to put those little center rows done. We have a square, that same size rectangle, square, rectangle, and so on. And then sew them between all of the rows, and don't forget to add one on the top and on the bottom. The body of the quilt is now all done, and we're going to put a series of borders on. The first border is this background fabric, and it is 1.5 inches. The gray that's going to match these cornerstones is cut at 2 inches. Then that green, we're going to go back down to 1.5 inches, and this is going to be a kicker fabric. It's really going to add a lot of color to this quilt, and it's also going to be the binding. The last border, that gray again, is going to be 3 inches. When all of those borders are done, this quilt is 58 inches by 69 inches. They're nice big blocks, and the fabric is so cheerful you can't help but think of a spring day. And this little green really does give it a little bit of a pop in color, and it's going to make a great binding. So we've taken that 1 square of fabric and have turned them into 4 snowballs. And as long as we press those seams going in opposite directions, they're just going to nestle together, and we're going to be able to get this done in time for a nice spring day. I'll put a link in the description to the free pattern and to the fabric from Benartex. And as always, thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and I do have a newsletter. It's all free under Sew Very Easy. And be sure to make every day a Sewtacular day. Bye for now.